Hello and welcome to Dell and Intel vPro Enable Advanced Remote Management, presented by Dell and Intel. I'm your host, Ed Hannon, and my guests today are Eric Townsend, Director of SMB Partner and MSP Marketing with Intel, and Jake Mazzola, Partner with Blue Harbor Technology. Thanks so much to Eric and Jake for being here, but let's get started. Today, Eric, Jake, and I are going to discuss Dell and Intel vPro Enable Advanced Remote Management. And let's get started here by going right into the first segment, which is we're going to talk about some remote management challenges. And Eric, this first set of questions will be for you. So first question I have for you is, why is it so difficult for companies to manage their remote workforce?
And it's interesting, right? You think about the workforces out there, a lot of times, and I think the data said about 80–90% of employees were always behind the firewall, right? They were actually in that kind of building, and there were probably only about 10% that were out. The workforce is changing so much nowadays that they're not just maybe at the office or remote. There's actually these hybrid people also. So I would say workforce is changing a ton. Another thing that's a little bit harder is that threats are increasing. So you think about the threats are out there, whether it's not just ransomware, but there's crypto out there. There's a lot of other threats that are kind of increasing out there. And then also I would say data and software are kind of ever changing. Like it's like if people would have thought, hey, there's this one collaboration tool it's leading the market, there's gonna be another one coming next. And to be able to manage all that, that's just something that's just a big challenge overall.
Excellent. And the next question I have for you would be, what particular areas prove most difficult for companies when it comes to remote management?
Ed, it's interesting. I would say I break it down into kind of the who, the where, and the how. The who part of it is really understanding what are our workers that are in our company, right? So think about, or if I'm managing companies, so if I said there is the remote worker, what does that really mean? Are they remote all the time? When I say remote worker, what type of security stuff do I give them? There is the office worker, right? So the office worker, what's their profile look like? What support do they need? Is it more or less than remote? And then we have the hybrid people in the middle of it, right? Of like, okay, how do we make sure if they're hybrid, they're getting the right patches and things are going on? So I would say that who part's a big part. The second part is the where. And why it's hard is because that firewall, where are they actually at? If they're not behind the firewall and they're outside the firewall, then how do I actually do different policies or procedures, right? And how that actually works. And then the big part I would say, and this everyone here is probably thinking about this, is the how. How do I keep everything secure? That's something that people are just struggling with, and that makes it so it's like this whole thing around remote management, but that remote security part of it is a big one too.
Great answer, and we'll get more into that a little bit later on. But in the short term, do you see this problem getting better anytime soon?
It's interesting, Ed. You asked a question of the timing. I'm an Intel person, right? We love technology. We love talking about where things are going. The hardest part is complexity. That's what I would have you think about, is that it may be harder or easier as when I would say it's going to get more complex three ways. One, more devices. So more devices that come on a network gets constrained, but more devices contribute to that. I would say second thing is that data and applications is just going to keep growing. And then that part that we don't know yet. And this is the one I'm just like, I talk to partners every day and I ask this question. Where are these work locations going? Is it, when we say remote work, people are thinking right now, maybe there's like a home environment, maybe it's somewhere they're at like a shared workspace, but what are these work locations going to look like? If people move from a big building to a smaller building, then how does that work from a timing perspective? But work locations growing, that'll be another part that gets more complex moving forward.
Let's move to the next segment. We're going to talk more about remote workforce in this segment. We're talking about building a remote workforce blueprint. And Eric, first question for you would be, what is it that remote workers need to work successfully no matter where they are?
Ed, this is a good one. I start with kind of building blocks, right? And I always say, if you really want to have a remote work environment, and this is a professional, I'm not talking personal right now or gamer like that, I'm saying in a professional environment, whether you're in education, healthcare, financial services, wherever you're at, right? You need to have kind of a professional device you're using. So think of like the Dell Latitude with vPro technology, the Dell Optiplex with vPro. You really want to make sure that. And then also we really want to make sure you have that professional business setup, I call it. Like, so the setup is I've got a monitor, I've got like a camera, I've got something where I can actually communicate with people, because in that remote blueprint, if you want to call it, where people are at, I do have to collaborate with people that may not be in my office. Once again, they may be remote, they may be behind a firewall somewhere else, but I got to make sure I have not only that professional device that can be managed, we'll talk about a little bit, but then also I have a professional setup that I can be used and be very effective in my business day.
So that's a great answer. And it leads into the next question, which is you're remote as we record this, Jake's remote as we record this, I'm remote as we record this, our production crew is remote as we record this, your coworkers are remote, everywhere. Basically, the office is wherever you are. Remote is not really a term anymore because we're all doing our own thing, coming together through a connection we'll get into in a little bit. Can you list some best practices that our viewers would be interested in hearing for the remote workers, no matter where they are?
Yeah, so it's interesting, Ed. I was talking to a partner last week, and he said, it's harder right now to actually manage people, because normally, and Jake and I'll talk about this later, but normally, like when people are in an office and it's like, hey, did you just get that email? Did you just see that? They can talk to someone else and they can validate there's something going on, right? When I'm in my house or another environment where there's other people, I don't know what actually is happening or not happening. So I would say kind of three things. First, basic blocking and tackling, got to make sure your software's up to date. That should just be, hey, have I had like a ping from my MSP, or have I had like a ping as far as to update my software? If I haven't had that, check that. I would also make sure that you are really clear on your system being managed. What I mean by that is that you should be like, gosh, what days does my system get updated, or when does that MSP or that partner actually go through and update my system? If that hasn't happened in a while, that's a problem, right? Maybe it's because your agent that's on your system that they normally manage all of a sudden, but we got to make sure people understand they actually want their system managed. We want that to actually happen. And then I would be really clear on the part of that, and this is just, it's a new thing to think about in your day, right? It's like being abreast of what are the different PC issues that are actually happening in your local area, right? And I'm not saying that, the bad actors, the hacker out there focused just in your town, but if there's a big breach that actually happens out there, you want to hear about it, right? And say, okay, gosh, there was this big breach, this one company, and I'm a customer of that. What do I need to be aware of, right? Because they get my account information, how to deal with that. So making sure that your software is up to date, making sure you're very, my system is being managed, I see things going to happen there, and then making sure you know what issues are out there, because there's three key things you'd want to do on a regular basis.
Could it be, before I get to the next question, could it be something as simple as knowing, like, it's the first day of school, there's going to be a surge in activity locally in your neighborhood or in your area? Could it be something as simple as just knowing what's going on in your community and what's going on in your geography beyond, like you said, knowing what sort of dangers are out there?
Yeah, I would even add, I think it's like about the specific activities around education, knowing that. One thing that I found out recently from a partner is that sometimes there's big festivals that happen across the U.S. So, like, for example, Austin City Limits is a big one people know about. There's different festivals. Those festivals are not happening a lot right now, but what's happening is there's actually the hackers and bad actors are making up emails saying, hey, do you want to reserve your spot for next year? If you don't know that actually is not happening, you're like, sure, yeah, I want to reserve it. And it's like, and they'll give all their information away, which you don't think about it. You're like, hey, I want to get my spot. I want to make sure I'm there next year. So I would say being aware of not only the basic things of just education, what's happening in your area, but also being clear on local events that may not be having local activities, just knowing kind of what's happening there.
And then the next question I should say is, where can solution providers turn if they want, just better remote management solutions?
This is, I think, the age-old question, right? If I'm a partner, I'm trying to build my business, I'm trying to do more. I really kind of put it in three areas. One is just really making sure that you are using the right tools. And, I tell you about the hardware Intel vPro technology, but there is a very big software component of that in a sense of the remote management tools out there. So if you use Datto, if you use ConnectWise, if you use Kaseya, if you use SpiceWorks, whatever those tools are, but having a set of tools that you can rely on and go to from a remote managed perspective. There's a lot of end customers I'm dealing with right now that are small businesses that are dealing with churn right now, where basically they had someone managing their business, but they really can't do remote management. They said they could, but now they're running into constraints. So they have to go with the new MSP and then try to understand the new MSPs and stuff. So that part around everyone here that's a partner, right, is making sure you've got the right remote management tools, the key thing. I would also, you're here today, you're learning about kind of our Dell and Intel technology with vPro, really proactively going together. There's a lot of information that's out there from partners and vendors right now. So be actively looking for those. And then the last one that I think, Ed, is an X factor that not everyone looks into. And I think more than ever right now, like I'm on different streams with different folks, and I think it's super important. It's actually being a part of a peer group. This is something that I'm a real big fan of, in a sense that there's always partners out there that usually join a peer group. So think of IT Nation Evolve, think of Taylor Business Group, think of True Methods, right? There's these groups out there. And they usually are doing it to like grow the business, right? Or grow their operations. Now I say the best thing about a peer group is you can actually find out like, what are people using to do all this remote stuff? And it literally, I've had more than 20 partners that I've worked with. I said, you need to get in a peer group. And every one of them have grown their business. And when I say make that growth thing, this is not only revenue, this is people, and this is customers. So I really encourage you. It's like knowing about the software tools is one thing, because some people are like, yeah, I got an RMM, I'm good. I got a PSA, I'm good, right? I still say you got to learn about the new technology out there. I had a partner recently said, SIM tools. What is a SIM tool? And they have an RMM tool. They don't know what SIM is, which was crazy because that's security, right? But also it being in that peer group, that's something that'll get you aware of, okay, how's my business operating right now? What solutions should I be looking at? And then how do I really help my people? So those are three things I'll have you lean on.
Yeah, the peer group is like the networking group that, at your social, or, your cocktail, your networking event. It's a way we can do it when we're all remote, for sure. So that's a great piece of advice. I want to move to the next segment now, which is improved remote security with remote management. It sort of ties some of the stuff we've talked about so far together. Why is remote security so difficult with this workforce that's spread all over the place and being remote everywhere?
Ed, it's people always laugh, right? It's like, is it software security? Is it hardware security? We use this word Intel hardened security. And by that is that in a lot of people's environment where they're working, there is no hardened security, meaning there is no firewall that's there, right? They're on a home network. They've got a basic router, the passwords on the internet that people can get access to. So I would say the big part is there's not a hardened security framework in place for people today.
This next question, this one's for you. This hopefully, I think you got this one. What Dell and Intel security solutions can help remote workers?
This is thank you for the softball. I like that. It's coming across. So slowly I'm going to hit this one. So a couple things. And I think most people always hear about, hey, multi-factor authentication. Got to have that, right? Which I kind of, that's just table stakes. So for people watching today, if you have not enacted this with all of your remote customers, you need to do it. Like it's a given. The reason why, I actually had a partner recently tell me that they hadn't done it and their kids got on their system and started doing things with it. That was really fun. They didn't realize that the password that they had put in they didn't realize it was how easy it was. So just make sure multi-factor authentication, that's just table stakes. I'd say the next part is really getting down to some operational, kind of best practice. So one, with our Intel vPro technology, like I said, it's in the latitudes, the optiplexes, that keyboard video mouse capability, right? Where you can remotely kind of be the hands, kind of maybe the mouse, and you can see, and that's really kind of a helpful piece. I'd say also around patch management, being able to remotely with vPro and our AMT technology, turn it on, make the updates, turn it off, and have that reliably actually happen. And then the hardened piece I throw back at Ed is this piece around on the edge. So this edge part, the system, whatever it is, we have something called our Intel Hardware Shield that sits on the BIOS now, so making sure there's not any code that can go in. But that part around how am I able to, kind of be that keyboard video mouse, better patch management, in the piece around that edge security, those would be three solutions, and Hardware Shield, vPro, and our AMT is the big things that I have you look at.
Perfect. And later on, we'll share some ways to get closer to that, more information about that. But next question I have for you is, how can, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but sort of playing off that answer, how can Dell and Intel vPro security solutions help the remote workers who are watching today's program?
Yeah, so I'd say in that remote work environment, and I said this a little earlier, but really the part around being managed. Now, that sounds kind of awkward. Like, okay, I have someone get access to my system. It should almost like be a little bit of an expectation. It's kind of like, if you have something wrong, you're like, you go to, get your car serviced, you're giving a person full access to your car to fix everything, right? You're the IT service provider. We'll talk to Jake here in a minute. He gets full access. So it should be a given. If I don't feel like my system is managed, I have someone else there helping me, kind of a wingman, that's a problem. So when I talk about manage that keyboard, video, mouse capability, if I have something wrong, at Intel, we have our IT folks, right? They use vPro. They actually can come in, they get on my system, and I kind of see the screen and see them moving the mouse around. But I should actually feel that I have someone else there that can actually help me, right? I would say on top of that, that piece around, well, that patch management, I mentioned earlier, got to make sure you're getting your system patches updated, but you need to also rely on your provider to be able to do those patches. So if you haven't seen a patch come across in like a week, you should be concerned. Call your partners. Hey, I haven't seen it come across. Like I said, there's lots of things that can actually come into play there, but that patch management piece is key. And then I would also, depending on the level person that's here today, there maybe it could be a CEO person, could be someone that's just helping kind of the day-to-day in a company. But that endpoint is really key. There's different types of data that's there from compliancy perspective, from just it being there. And I think to really understand how are you going to harden the edge, we call it, right? So the Intel Hardware Shield, great. If it's a managed security appliance that's actually sits in that home environment that basically manages the flow, things coming in, whatever it is, but really to be clear that you need to look at all the solutions that are out there. And like I mentioned, the Dell Opti and Latty that have it in it. You can even use those little small Optiplexes for that remote security appliance. So there's a lot of good things out there, but just being very aware that those, you have to be that open to being managed, and you got to make sure that I'm updating my patches. I'm making sure that someone can manage me at any time.
Excellent. That's everything there was great information, and thank you for sharing it. So this next part of the program is one of my favorite parts, because we sort of turn the tables around a little bit, and I'll go away for a couple of minutes, and Eric turns from the one answering the questions to the one asking the questions, and then our guest Jake is going to play the role of Eric, and he's going to answer Eric's questions. So we call it Let's Hear from an MSP. I'm going to step out of the way, and I'm going to let Eric and Jake take it away.
Thanks, Ed. Jake, super excited to have you here today. I'm going to try and make sure I ask you some kind of compelling questions, but I think more real world what's happening right now. And I know there's lots of customers you're dealing with, right? And I know the different types of customers you have, but what right now would you say is kind of the biggest remote management kind of issue you're dealing with these new remote workers?
Yeah, Eric, that's a great question. I think for us, the biggest challenge is, you touched on earlier, the importance of making sure it's a managed device. And, we're dealing with unprecedented times. So businesses are having to, make business decisions and start to really understand, that they may have to take on certain risks. If they're not able to make certain investments due to their business being impacted during this unprecedented time. So yeah, we're seeing, a lot of challenges with, devices that aren't, basically managed, right? So we're really trying to help our business clients figure out, and help them understand the risks associated with, devices not being managed. And so, the biggest issue for us is, if it's not going to be a managed device, we want to make sure that our business owners and clients are educated in understanding that, we're not going to be able to be on their arm and help them there as we would be if it was a managed device. Luckily for us, most of the managed devices we have leverage, Dell Intel vPro technology combined. We combine the Dell hardware with the Intel vPro, remote management technology. So for us, this has been, maybe a more easier transition. We were looking at vPro technology initially as a way to, save us from having to roll trucks out, and having to deal with a lot of, issues that maybe, would typically be something you'd go on site for. So for us, it was like the tables turned, and now we were better prepared to be able to kind of now leverage this new remote, this remote management solution that we've already had in place, but, in a totally different perspective and in a different light.
So Jake, help me out here. So when we think about the technologies, right, and you mentioned about kind of vPro technology and what Dell has also, what is there specific ones that pop out for you guys? You're like, hey, this is kind of just kind of our working procedure, we use these specific technologies or these specific use cases?
Yeah. So, in terms of how we leverage vPro, I think some of the best things you touched on it earlier, patch management, such a critical component. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm sure if there's other MSPs on here or other service providers or, VARs or whoever, MSSPs, patching it's a beast. My business partner manages it. It's an ongoing process that we have to look at each and every week. And it's challenging, because here it's a mutual, it's a kind of a, we have to be in it together. And when I say that is the client has to understand the importance of it as well, right? Because we lean on them to, make the device available so that we can apply the updates in a timely manner. Now, traditionally, without vPro technology, we're not really able to do much there. We're going to have to call the customer the next day, hey, you left your laptop on or this, that, the other. So we've been able to leverage that and actually power systems on to help us facilitate our what we're saying we're providing and really ensuring the integrity of our services at the highest level. I can't tell you, like the KVM feature for us has been, it's huge, like just absolutely everything we need it to be right now. And I say that because, for example, we had a customer in the midst of this pandemic have a situation where their motherboard crashed, right? And so we're in a situation where we're, trying to evaluate it. And, this is very early on where companies are still trying to figure out, their COVID policies and, who's allowed to come in, who's available. There's a lot of unknowns that, basically right there, that time period. So for us, it was great for us to be able to seamlessly connect into the system, evaluate it, and coordinate with Dell's great supports that they have. If you're an MSP and you're not, pairing your Dell systems with like pro support services, I'd highly recommend that, as well as with vPro technology. And then lastly, the remote remediation component of it too. I can't stress that enough as well.
Yeah, and Jake, so when we talk about the technology, we talk about the kind of the things you're able to go and handle. Is there any other advice that you would give to to kind of everyone's listening right now, just on how do you, when you think about your company and you think about kind of this remote workforce, is there anything you're doing differently or anything that you've learned that, hey, different than when people are in the office, this is how we've pivoted? And it can be a process, it could be a policy, just something that people say, these are kind of one or two nuggets that really would help them.
Yeah, so I would say nugget one would I think we all kind of went through it initially, as MSPs here on the phone. I mean, on this call rather. First things first, we're trying to get customers set up. It's a little bit of a fire drill initially, but now I think that the focus needs to shift to having business conversations with your clients. Now is the time to spend. People are more available now than I think than they've ever been. I feel like we're not commuting as much, we're not traveling as much, which is freeing us up to have more time for what I like to think is our more, valuable and important conversations around security, specifically, obviously, with this new remote workforce. So definitely make sure you're having those conversations with your business clients, specifically security, cybersecurity. These are all great things. And it's important for businesses to understand the risks that this new workforce, this new way of working has brought about. I would say the second piece of advice is, really just, you got to make sure that you bring a lot of awareness and constant communication. This is the time you really want to be, communicating, and you want to make sure that you're there, that your clients know that you're there and you can still help them, in various ways. And, if they're in need of a new system, or if their systems are coming up at the end of their life cycle, it's a great time to implement, technology solutions. Look at the Dell Latitude line, that support Intel vPro technology, because really it's just going to enable you to help your clients more in this new work environment. So I can't stress that enough. Really, take a look at your assets that you have under management. If you're an MSP, see where you can identify opportunities and really get out there and try to make an impact and a difference.
Jake, thank you, man. That's some great insight. And I think for everyone here, this is going to be stuff that you can actually be actual on, and just be thinking about how this fits in your model day, your process, your procedures in your company, and how do we actually help better support this remote work environment moving forward.
Great stuff, guys. Like I said, that's my favorite part of the program. So we're gonna start to head toward down the home stretch here. And Eric, I'm gonna bring it back to you And just in some sort of summarizing and summation, some of the stuff we've talked about, can you rattle off, 2, 3, 4 of some of the most important things that we've covered today?
Yeah, and I would just say that we know that this remote workforce and the management of it is getting more complex. So complexity is raising. We got to make sure we've got, the second thing I'd say is having managed devices, business managed devices. And I'd say the third thing is that with management does come along the issue of security. And we really got to make sure that we are making sure patches are happening as kind of daily, if not more. And that comes with all the great vPro technology capability of KVM, right? That remote piece of getting in, and then also being able to do patch updates anytime. That turning on and off power is a key one too. Those would be my 3 things.
Excellent. And then we did cover a lot of ground as we've talked about, but is there anything that maybe in the preparation for today's program, sort of putting together your thoughts for today's program that you put on the shelf, maybe the bookshelf behind you, and you'd like to pull it down and talk about for a minute or two, just something that help our audience, something that they could keep in mind as we move forward here.
I'm going to steal what Jake said a second ago, because it's something I could spend a lot more time on, but communication. I was just talking to a group of partners this morning, and I said the number one important thing you can do in all of 2020 is have conversations with your customers. Number one important thing. That's just the most important thing right now is having conversations. And I think Jake said it perfectly of like, there's the business conversation, the technology conversation, and the I care conversation. So the business conversation is, hey, by the way, I need to make sure you're successful this year. Here's some best practices of what we're doing in our business. And it can be culture. It can be, how we run the business. But here's some people we use for our stuff. It could be accounting, could be whatever, right? But just business conversation. Technical conversation is the heart to heart. And Jake, you're referencing, it's like, okay, you have an old system that is not up to date and is a security loophole. We need to have this heart to heart right now. I've mentioned this like 7 times in our last QBRs. We need to fix it now. Because if not, ransomware is going to hit you in 2 weeks, and then they'll ask you for a lot of money you don't have in cash, and then there's going to be problems. The third conversation is that I care conversation, saying, look, don't just consider me someone that's your IT provider. I'm live in the same town as you. I'm going through the same thing. I think our kids didn't go to the same school. So if there's stuff that comes up, feel free to reach out to me, right? There's lots of things that happen. I've got a huge staff of people, right? And I mean huge, meaning like they have knowledge that's big. And so there may be other ways that we can step up, not just in our traditional how we provide IT, but I would say that part of having conversations is key. Existing customers, massive. New customers, I would even say, is bigger, because that really shows that you're going to be the same if we're in a time where it's remote or if they're not.
Excellent. And then just before we go, what's the first, and when we do go, what's the first thing that everyone watching today's program should do when they leave today's program?
I think it's a real simple one. I would first just go into your specific tools that you use, right? We talked about an RMM tool. I would do a scan to basically see what vPro systems you have out there, right? So the Dell, like I said, Latitudes, Optiplexes, even some Precision. Look and see what's out there. So that'd be the first thing. And then I would also have the conversation with maybe your services team of how do we actually do remote management today? Like, do we feel like we've got, when we say remote management, I'm not just talking for people who are not in our office, but like if they're not behind a firewall, how do we do that? If they're behind the firewall, how do we do that? Do we got the whole patch management strategy down? And just see the responses you get, and is it something we're like, okay, awesome, we've crushed it, we feel great, or is it like, we need a little more on that? I will tell everyone, for partners I'm talking to, there are a lot of partners that are actually growing still right now, right? They're actually onboarding more customers. What's going to happen once again is that we're going to have people working in different remote work environments. The types are going to grow. So this is the time right now where we get our policies, procedures, everything in place for all our teams, get them trained, so that when there are more work environments and different changes like that we can handle all that. So those would be my ones that I give advice on to start with today.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but I want to thank Eric and Jake for joining me today. I learned a ton. I hope everyone watching did as well. I want to thank you all for watching today's program. Once again, I'm Ed Hannon, host of this little program we call Dell and Intel vPro, Enable Advanced Remote Management, presented by Dell and Intel. Thanks a lot, everybody, and have a great day.